a teenage film snob, baby. I was a teenage film snob, baby.
The year is 1986, and George Lucas has given us American Graffiti, Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Return of the Jedi, and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. But now it's time for a new hero. It's time for intergalactic scorpions, trans-dimensional threats, anthropomorphic waterfowl, sweet, sweet lady duck-boobies, Leah Thompson, Tim Robbins, and Howard T. Duck. Welcome to I Was a Teenage Film Snob. I'm James Chalmers, and this is why you should watch Howard the Duck. All right, everyone, we're back into another episode of Why You Should Watch. Continuing along the trend of Marvel films, I've been rewatching all the Marvel films ever made in preparation for Avengers Doomsday. And whilst I was developing this series for the podcast, I figured there were a couple of Marvel films that don't get the love and affection that maybe they deserve. We talked about Daredevil recently. We talked about the Fantastic Four from the 90s. So now we're going all the way back to 1986 for Howard the Duck. Before we talk about why you should watch it, let's go into some facts, some details. Let's talk about its history and, of course, why people don't like it. And then, of course, we'll talk about why you should watch it. I only watched this movie for the first time in 2024. I picked it up on Blu-ray while we were in Scotland, and I had a really great time with it. It's a weird movie for sure. I wanted to show it to my kid, and I'm so glad I watched it by myself first, because this is not a flick for kids, which we will get into. But let's talk about Howard the Duck. It was directed by Willard Huyck, who also directed Messiah of Evil. I laugh every time I read his name because his name is spelled almost like Hyuk, which kind of sounds like duck. Writer also Willard Huyck and Gloria Katz. Gloria Katz wrote American Graffiti. She also wrote Messiah of Evil, Indiana Jones, and the Temple of Doom. They're actually a writing pair, so the two of them worked on it together on all of those films. The studio was Universal and Lucasfilm. It was made on a budget of $37 million and had a box office of $37.9 million, which, again, sounds great, but if you remember that Hollywood maths, it's nowhere near enough money. They needed to double it to make a profit, so it was considered a flop. The film stars Leah Thompson, Jeffrey Jones, Tim Robbins, and Ed Gale as Howard. The film has a 4.8 out of 10 IMDb score. On Rotten Tomatoes, critics have given it a 13%, whereas the audience has given it 38%. So whilst they're not in complete agreement, they both agree that it's not a particularly good film. But again, I'm here to stick up for it. I'm not defending it. I'm not telling you it's good, but I'm going to tell you why to watch it. But before we talk about why you should watch it, let's dive into some history. Let's go all the way back to 1973. Following the release of American Graffiti, George Lucas met up with his old film school buddies Willard Huyck and Gloria Katz and introduced them to a little comic book about a wisecracking private detective by the name of Howard the Duck. Also, I'm definitely pronouncing the director's name wrong, so I apologize. It is what it is. Lucas believed at the time that its quirky sense of humor paired with strong elements of film noir and absurdism made it ripe for a cinematic tale. He initially approached John Landis about adapting the comic, who declined. That would have been fascinating, a John Landis version of Howard the Duck, because at this time he would have done Blues Brothers, he would have done Animal House. I don't know whether Twilight Zone, I haven't seen the Twilight Zone movie. Obviously, there was a lot of controversy around that, so that might be one of the reasons why it never moved forward. But you know, American Werewolf in London, like Landis is such a fascinating filmmaker. I think a version of Howard the Duck, particularly if he had have gone through the scope of American Werewolf in London, because the comics are quite mature. So it would have been quite interesting to see a darker, more adult take on Howard the Duck. I think even the first issue of Howard the Duck has nudity in it. Like there's some naked women in these comics, so and not naked duck women, naked human women, which we'll get there. The trio approached comic creator Steve Gerber as they were seriously considering adapting the book. Steve Gerber created Howard the Duck. And following a partnership with Marvel, Universal Studios optioned the film as they had passed on many successful Lucas properties previously and wanted to be in on the George Lucas business. They had declined many things George Lucas had brought to them, and presumably they were hoping that Howard the Duck would be as big as Star Wars. I mean, that's why you get in bed with George Lucas, isn't it? Because he makes these hugely profitable adventure films. Huyck and Katz led the development of the film, making changes to the character early on, choosing to abandon Howard's obnoxious and rude personality to something a little nicer. So you will notice that in the film, he's quite friendly, he's quite kind. He has a little bit of sarcasm, but in the books, he's a hard-nosed or a hard-billed detective. During the screenwriting process, the focus shifted from the comic's satirical tone in favor of special effects. This is a staple of the Lucasfilms that are less appreciated, where there's too much focus on what it looks like and not enough on story. The prequel trilogy is probably a really good example of that as well, probably the most common example. Early readers of the screenplay were confused by the film's suggested tone, given that it was light-hearted and family-friendly in many scenes, but then had quite dark and sexual elements directed at more mature viewers. The film was at one stage intended to be an animated movie, allowing the filmmakers to produce a more faithful adaptation of the comic book, using Howard the Duck number 6 as its primary inspiration. However, this idea was scrapped so that the production could utilize the artistry of Lucas's industrial light and magic, again prioritizing visuals over story. I think an animated film would have been incredible. I think there's a lot of benefit to it because Duck World is so different from our world. We get a glimpse of it in the movie, but I remember reading about the film that they wanted to show so much more of Duck World, but just budgetary restraints, they couldn't really do it. And if they had have gone in and done it the way the Lord of the Rings animated film was done, or like Fritz the Cat, with Robert Crumb, again leaning into the more mature, not as R-rated as Fritz the Cat, obviously, but going into that more mature style of animation, I think that would have really worked for them. But it's a missed opportunity. And Howard the Duck's never had his due since. He was meant to have an animated series produced by Kevin Smith, and that got scrapped as well. Leah Thompson was cast following the success of Back to the Future. You might remember she plays Marty's mum. Jeffrey Jones was cast due to his performance in the awards darling Amadeus. Jeffrey Jones, the principal in Ferris Bueller. And then Katz and Chuck also cast a newcomer, a then unknown Tim Robbins, in his first cinematic role. This is Tim Robbins' first movie, which is insane, because he would go on to be in Shawshank Redemption and all sorts of other wonderful films. And he has very fond memories of this film. There are interviews where people approached him about it and wondered, did you consider this a mistake? Because it was such a flop. It was your first film. It could have been your last film. But he really enjoyed it. It was a chance to work with George Lucas and be on a George Lucas film. And I really like that about actors and people in the film industry. It's a mostly very supportive industry where people do stick up for each other and talk about, the joys of working with other people. And a lot of the time, actors will say, they didn't know it was a bad movie until after it was released, because you're so in the zone in the middle of it all that you don't realize that maybe it hasn't come together quite the way you were hoping. Ed Gale was cast as the body of Howard the Duck, originally as an understudy for child actor Jordan Prentice, but Prentice eventually bowed out of the role due to the difficult shooting conditions of wearing the duck suit. So Prentice was a child actor. He was going to be the body in the suit of Howard the Duck, and then just have Ed Gale as to his understudy and kind of going for the more heftier parts. But shooting with children is really, really difficult, especially in the 80s. And I think there was a bit of danger, and obviously being in that suit for so long, quite sweaty. Ed Gale is a little person, and an actor, and he had worked, I think, with Lucas previously, possibly on Star Wars with some of the Ewok stuff. I can't remember exactly, but he ended up taking over the role of the body. But he only was the body; he didn't do the voice. For the voice of Howard, Jay Leno, John Cusack, Robin Williams, and Martin Short all expressed interest and auditioned for the role. That's crazy. What a film this might have been if someone, one of those four people had been the voice. And interestingly, Robin Williams was cast, but he ended up quitting, because the way they shot Howard the Duck was they shot all of the footage first and then had Robin Williams come in and record the voiceover afterwards. And if you know anything about Robin Williams and his voice work, he always liked to do the voiceover first. And Tara Strong, famous voice actress Tara Strong, explained it best. She goes, if you do the footage first, you get half the creativity of Robin Williams. Like, if you have ever listened to those outtakes of Robin Williams doing those improv for Genie, there's so much funny stuff in there. Like, the reason why the Genie in Aladdin is so topical and makes so many pop cultural references is that was just Robin Williams in a studio just throwing stuff out to see what stuck. Robin Williams referred to this his time on Howard the Duck as being shackled while trying to match the flapping duck's bill. So instead, the voiceover was taken by Chip Zien instead. At one point, Howard was imagined to be a fully CGI character, but following a series of failed tests, the filmmakers instead opted for a costume with puppetry for his facial features. Best call. Really good call. Lucas obviously having a lot of experience with puppets, especially in the Star Wars films. And 1986, I don't know what that CGI would have looked like, but it would not hold up today. And I know people don't like this film and they say it doesn't hold up, but it would have been a lot harder to watch if they're looking at 1986 CGI. So good call going with the suit and puppetry. And then in 1986, Marvel's first theatrical movie since 1944's Captain America serial was released. This was Marvel's first film post-World War II. They had a Captain America serial in the 40s, and then nothing. This was the first Marvel movie that got a theatrical release. That's insane to me. I had no idea. I thought some of the other ones, some of the Captain Americas from the 80s came first, but no, this is the first Marvel film. So I'm so glad I included it in my rewatch. It was met with overwhelmingly negative reviews from audiences and critics, most citing the inconsistent tone of the film. It received 7 Razzie nominations and 1 in 4 categories. It has since found its audience on home video with a VHS and Laserdisc release in 1987, a DVD release in 2009, a Blu-ray release in 2016, and a 4K remaster in 2021, which says one clear message to me. There is a demand for Howard the Duck. If there wasn't, they wouldn't keep releasing it. It has been released on every format. And that's not to say that most films aren't. Of course they are. But not always. A lot of the time, at least my experience in Australia, is a lot of the time we get a DVD release and not a Blu-ray release. And then years later, we get a 4K. We just got a 4K release of Panic Room, a David Fincher film. We never got it on Blu-ray. They skipped Blu-ray with us until now. Now it's a 4K steelbook with a Blu-ray in there. But yeah. To be fair, Howard the Duck is not available in Australia on Blu-ray or on 4K. I got mine from the UK, but still, there is a demand for this film, and there is a kind of a time-honoured affection, and it did find its audience. So let's talk about why people didn't like it. What are the complaints with Howard the Duck? The inconsistent tone. That's the number one complaint. That's what the critics had trouble with. That's what audiences at the time had trouble with. And it's what a lot of people still have trouble with. There's a reason why I haven't shown this film to my wife or to my daughter, but even my wife. It's just, it looks like a kid's film and it's not. And it does get quite sexual in places. Howard is constantly trying to sleep with Leah Thompson's character. There's weird duck nudity in the first 5 minutes of the film. Howard gets sucked through a portal and he ends up breaking through all these different walls in the apartment complex, and there's a woman in a bath. And she's a duck, but she's got boobs and nipples, and it's very, very strange. So I think that tone really confused people and probably put people off a little bit as well. I like weird stuff. I like absurd, bizarre films. I like stuff that challenges audiences. And that's not me being like, oh, look at me, I'm so advanced. Like, not at all. But I've seen all the greats. I've seen what everyone loves. So what I like to look at is what people don't love. That's why I'm doing this series. What's the stuff that people don't love, and what fun can we find in there? And there's a lot of fun to be had. So I understand why people struggle with it, but and I do agree the tone is inconsistent. But if you can appreciate it and accept its absurdism, there's still a lot of fun to be had. The second complaint kind of spirals out of this, and it's the creepy adult themes. And again, I get it. It is creepy that a humanoid duck is trying to sleep with an adult woman. It is creepy that there are naked duck women in this. It's you know, it is what it is. It's like it's meant to be like a film noir, you know, which it kind of is, where the detective gets the girl, but the detective is another animal. And I'm trying to think if there are any other examples of this happening in other movies. I'm sure there are. But none recently, to the best of my knowledge. So, you know, some of the complaints from the fans of Howard the Duck, the comic book fans, were that they softened his personality. He's usually a hard-drinking, sarcastic cynic, which we talked about in the history of the film. They kind of went in and made changes. Apparently Gerber, the creator of Howard the Duck, actually liked the changes. He thought that like it worked with the script, and he hoped that the satire would work. But unfortunately, it was just a little bit too soft on the satire for people. I don't mind the kind of innocence of Howard in this. He's very kind of like naive in terms of the way he engages with other characters, and I don't quite mind that. He's still got a bit of like a Ferris Bueller attitude. He's just not as hardened, as I mentioned. And then finally, the uncanny visuals. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I'm getting sick, so that's why I'm making these horrible noises. The uncanny visuals, whether it's the CGI scorpions or the lightning or Jeffrey Jones turning into a mutant, or Howard himself. And again, I don't disagree. This might be the first film, maybe Blues Brothers I agreed as well, where I don't disagree with any of the complaints. They're all valid. Everything people have complained about with this film makes sense to me. I understand if you can't keep track of the tone because it keeps changing. I get that. I understand if you think it's creepy, because it is. I understand if you don't like that Howard's been softened, because if you're a fan and they've changed the character, of course. And I understand that there's so many uncanny, weird visuals. So I get all of that. For me, they're not problems. For me, they're weird little flares that make the film more interesting, but we all get different things from different films. So now that we've talked about the complaints, let's dive into the reason we're here. Why should you watch it? Well, first of all, the soundtrack. The soundtrack's great. Leah Thompson plays a character in a band. She's a lead singer and a guitarist, and there's so much like 80s style pop, like guitar-driven pop rock in there. It's really fun. I really dig it. I love all that. That's great. Like, I know in a lot of the films I've talked about, the soundtrack is one of the reasons why, and people might be like, I could just buy the soundtrack or use Spotify and not watch the film. But there's something about seeing, it within the confines of the film. At the very end of the film when Leah Thompson is playing the guitar and Howard comes out and I think he plays guitar as well. I can't remember now. It's been a minute since I watched it. But there's something all about that. The duck suit is great. Like people found it uncanny and weird, but it works really well. Like, especially in retrospect, I imagine at the time people's heads exploded. Like, what is this? But now, 40 years on, because this film is 40 years old this year, it works for me. And it probably shouldn't work for me, but it does. I think the duck suit's really great. I like all the animatronics. The same way the Ninja Turtles still hold up for me from the 90s. It's that same thing. Like, you watch those old Ninja Turtle films, and it's so easy to be like, those are guys in suits. But never once do you question, especially as a kid. As an adult, obviously I know it's a suit, but I still buy into it because the animatronics and the faces work so well. You don't get that from the CGI Turtles. Like, I love Out of the Shadows, the second Michael Bay one. I haven't seen the first one quite a while, but I really enjoy that Out of the Shadows movie. But one problem I do have with it is they're so clearly CGI characters. I know they're not really there, but those turtles are really there. Howard is in every scene. He's really there, so I like that suit. I think you should also embrace the campiness of it all. There's something deliciously cheesy and 80s about this film. Like, you could not have made this version of this film in any other decade. The 70s, it wouldn't have worked. The 90s was too late. Definitely 2000s. In the 2000s, we start getting gritty and grounded. So I think, it's the perfect film for its time. You get away with it because it's the 80s. So if you're looking for some really kind of camp, silly 80s films, you got to whack this on your list because it's so much fun and bizarre. And to be fair, a lot of 80s films had inconsistent tones. If you look at a lot of John Hughes films, like Breakfast Club or 16 Candles and stuff like that, like, yes, they have funny moments, but they get very, very dark. They're not just teenage dramas. Like, they're teenagers dealing with adult problems and speaking like adults and played by adults, to be honest, for most of it as well. So it's very in keeping with the 80s era of films for that tonal shift. And then the final reason you should watch it, and the main reason you should watch it, is Leah Thompson. She's great. She's probably like a top 3 80s performer for me. Everything she's in, every time I see her, I think she's wonderful. She's fun. She's cute. She's exciting. She has a real presence about her on stage. And like, I don't know whether she knew what she was signing up for when she did it, but she is so committed. Like, you buy that she's this rock star chick who's falling in love with a duck. Like, you just buy it because she's so earnest and wonderful in it. So Leah Thompson is maybe the main reason you should watch this film. And I know people are like, well, if you want to watch Leah Thompson, go watch Back to the Future. Yeah, Dodoy. Of course. You should watch Back to the Future every year. What I'm saying is, if you want to see more of her, watch Howard the Duck. So there we are. I imagine I'll get some pushback on this one. This is a film that most people do not like at all. But there's a lot of fun to be had. And I'll say this is an easier film to watch than Blues Brothers 2000, for sure. This one I can, Blues Brothers 2000, it's going to be a minute before I watch that one again. Whereas Howard the Duck, I watched 2 years ago. I watched it this year. I'll probably watch it in the next 18 months again because I like it. I think it's fun and it's just a real time capsule. So that is Howard the Duck. Next up, I think we'll be doing the 2015 Fantastic Four movie. That's kind of where I'm going. We are going to have a Pod Squad show coming up soon as well. As we talked about since the start of the year, this year's been very different. Maddie has had quite a different schedule. Nick's had a lot of stuff in his personal life happen in the last few weeks as well. All exciting for the most part. And I'm sure he'll talk about that when he's on the show next as well. So I'm hoping after this episode, we should have a Pod Squad show because I would like to talk about the movies so far of 2026 because it's been a great start to the year. But until then, thanks for listening and checking it out. Hopefully you dug it. And that is why you should watch Howard the Duck. I'll see you next week.